So, how do you know anything for sure? I mean, really know it. How do you know that fire is hot or that a lemon is sour? Well, the answer seems pretty obvious, right? You've experienced it. Today, we're diving into the powerful philosophy behind that simple truth, empiricism, the idea that all of our knowledge is born directly from experience.
Seriously, think about it for a second. You know a hot stove will burn you. You just know. But why do you trust that knowledge? Because your senses told you so. That really simple idea that our senses are the source of truth was once a totally revolutionary concept. So let's trace it back to its roots. And that revolutionary idea? It's called empiricism. At its very core, it's the view that knowledge isn't something we're just born with. Nope. Instead, our minds build it up, little by little, from everything our senses gather, everything we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell.
Now, to really get our heads around this, we have to go way back to an incredibly powerful metaphor, the idea of the mind as a totally blank slate.
And what's just wild is how old this idea is. This is basically a conversation happening across almost 2,000 years. Way back in ancient Greece, you've got Aristotle, on the left, who first suggested the mind is like an unwritten tablet. Then you fast forward all the way to the 17th century, and you get the man on the right, John Locke, who took that ancient idea and made it world famous.
Locke just nails it with this simple, powerful image. He said, let's imagine the mind is like white paper, completely blank. Everything that ever gets written on it, every single idea, every belief we have, comes from one source, the ink of experience. Absolutely nothing is there before that.
Now, this whole blank slate idea put the empiricists on a collision course with their main rivals, the rationalists. You see, rationalists believed that we could figure out the truth just by using pure reason, like a mathematical proof. But the empiricists fired back with the killer question. How can you reason about anything if you haven't experienced it first?
This debate really came to a head in the 17th and 18th centuries, mostly in Great Britain. And it featured three philosophical heavyweights who built on and, let's be honest, argued with each other's ideas across generations.
First up, we have John Locke again, kind of the father of modern empiricism. He argued that everything written on that white paper mind of ours comes from just two sources. First, there's sensation. That's all the raw data our senses are pulling in from the outside world. And second, reflection, which is just the mind looking at its own operations. For Locke, that's it. That's the whole recipe for all human knowledge.
Okay, now hold on, because this is where the idea starts to get, well, a little weird. A generation after Locke, you get George Berkeley. And he takes Locke's logic and follows it to a pretty radical place. He asks, look, if all we ever know are our own sensations, how can we prove that anything, a tree, a rock, anything actually exists when we're not looking at it? His famous answer, we can't. For Berkeley, to be is to be perceived.
And that brings us to our final figure, the Scottish philosopher David Hume. And what Hume does is he takes the core ideas of empiricism and pushes them right to their most skeptical and frankly kind of unsettling limits. This table here just lays it all out so perfectly. You can really see the progression, can't you? We start with Locke's clean and simple blank slate. Then Berkeley takes it a step further into subjective idealism, making us question if an unseen world can even exist. And finally, Hume just lands the knockout punch, saying that all our experience really gives us is habit, not certainty. And that brings us to his most famous challenge, the problem of induction.
All right, let's zoom in on this so-called problem of induction, because this is a big one. It's an argument that really shakes the very foundation of how we think about the world and even how science works.
So Hume starts with this question. It sounds almost silly, but it's brilliant. How can you be absolutely certain the sun will rise tomorrow? And your answer's probably, well, duh, because it always has. But Hume shows us there's a massive logical flaw hiding in that very simple answer.
So here's his logic laid right out for us. We believe the future is going to be like the past. Okay, why? Well, because in all of our past experience, it always has been. Do you see what's happening? We're using past experience to justify our belief in past experience. It's a perfect circle. We actually have no logical reason to believe the pattern will hold. We just have a really powerful habit of assuming it will.
And this right here is Hume's bombshell. Our belief in cause and effect, the very foundation of science and just getting through the day, isn't a product of some rational proof. It's just a psychological habit. We've seen one thing follow another so many times that we develop this powerful expectation, this custom. But for Hume, it's not logical certainty. Not at all.
But here's the twist. Hume's skepticism, it wasn't the end of the story, not even close. In fact, the principles of empiricism went on to become the engine of the modern world. The conversation just kept evolving. In the 19th century, John Stuart Mill went so far as to argue that even math is ultimately based on experience. Then, in the 20th century, you get a movement called logical positivism, which basically said any statement that couldn't be tested by experience was literally meaningless. And eventually, pragmatism came along, trying to find a middle ground, blending the best bits from both empiricism and rationalism.
So, why should any of us care about this centuries-old philosophical spat? Because its fingerprints are all over our modern world. That core idea, that claims have to be tested against real-world observation, is the absolute bedrock of the scientific method. When a new drug is tested, that's empiricism in action. When a physicist smashes particles together to check a theory, that's empiricism. All of modern science, it's a direct legacy of this incredible philosophical journey.
So yeah, think about that. What started out as this abstract philosophical debate about where ideas come from has literally become the engine driving modern discovery, technology, and pretty much our whole understanding of the universe.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to chew on. If empiricism is right, if all of our knowledge is built from the limited data our senses can gather, what about the things we can't experience? What are the ultimate limits of what we can ever truly know?